recorded live.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Fight for Our Freedom Radio. And I'm your host, Badbaby. And tonight we are honored to have with us Kevin Annett, and we are going to be talking about his book and update us with what's going on in his life. Welcome to the show, Kevin. Are you the one tin soldier that's riding away?
Well, I guess that's one way to put it, but I'm not riding away from anything.
Oh, well, congratulations on your book, Hidden No Longer, Genocide in Canada, Past and Present. Is it hidden no longer, Kevin, or is it still hidden?
Well, you know, it's not hidden at all. It never was, of course, to many of the victims, but now the world has no excuse. They know about this genocide, not only against the Indians, but that's happening against everybody. And things get so blatant all the time. Like just this last week, the Canadian government got permission from the courts to destroy all the evidence of these crimes in Indian schools. So, I mean, you know, I'm amazed how anyone retains any kind of faith in the system.
The problem is, and I said it the last time you were on, they own all the courts and the police and everything, so they've got them in their pocket. You know, it's like fighting a wall.
Well, you know, it's that's the impression they want everybody to have, so that the more conscious people just kind of give up and crawl away somewhere. But in reality, their power is shaking all the time, and you know, we proved that. People should go and look at my two new books. On the website, the one with all the evidence of genocide in Canada is murderbydecree.com, and the evidence there is so conclusive that they were trying to wipe out children using these schools. The 50% death rate, the sterilization programs, all of that, and how they continue to disappear today. You know, especially in the west coast of North America. Huge numbers of Native people going missing. And so, you know, it's connected to the old need for land and resources and money. Just follow the money and you'll see the crime.
You know, I was looking at the video on your website today. I watched the whole thing, and oh, my heart just broke listening to these people tell what happened to them when they were children and how they were tortured, how they threw snakes in the bathtub, why they were taking a bath to punish them. I mean, just the things that they've gone through, such horrendous things, and to have to live with that for the rest of your life, I just can't imagine. And the fact that they even had this done to them, and my main question to you is this still going on?
Well, that's part of our book. The last third of our book talks about the ongoing crimes. And everything that happened in the schools, in the residential schools, is continuing today. It's just taken a different form. And again, you know, it's easy to think this is just happening to certain groups. But I mean, the fact that so many people go missing all the time is not unrelated to these crimes of genocide. I mean, I document in the book, Murder by Decree, how the police and the courts are heavily involved, especially in the west part of Canada, of forcing people off their land, whether they're native or white, in order to allow Chinese and American corporations to grab the resources. And that's happening as we speak. As a matter of fact, one thing we've shown is that the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Act has hired a hired death squad, really, to go around and kill off all of the, you know, the more conscious natives, the ones who are fighting to retain their land. And there's private death squads being hired by these Chinese corporations that are, you know, establishing themselves all over northern Canada. So it's the same old stuff that happened a century ago. The problem now is that everyone thinks we're so much better now, it doesn't go on.
So the evidence was ordered to be destroyed. Does that mean that you cannot present the evidence anymore?
Well, here's the thing. What they're referring to there is this bogus Truth and Reconciliation Commission that they set up to investigate themselves. And even under the terms of that commission, no one could name the name of a killer in any of their statements. Like if an Indian who went through these Indian schools had witnessed a killing, they weren't allowed to name who it was or name the church or anything. It was totally censored. But even that evidence, they're giving themselves the permission to destroy now. And imagine a court saying, yeah, it's okay to destroy evidence from a crime scene. Well, this is the biggest crime scene in Canadian history, and the courts and government now say, well, we'll just trash any evidence we don't like. That's a crime right there, yet again. And they're lying because they told the natives, oh, no, we're going to publish all these things within a few years. The problem is natives people stupidly believe them, and now they're getting screwed again. So that's not accidental. That's happening now because it happened within a few weeks of our publishing Murder by Decree, because in our book, we published all the evidence they censored out of their commission. And in a panic reaction, they've decided to destroy what they have. So, I mean, they're just hoping that people will not look at the real evidence. And again, I urge people to go to murderbydecree.com, go to amazon.com, and order our 2 books, Unrelenting, Between Sodom and Zion, and Murder by Decree, The Crime of Genocide in Canada.
Kevin, the crimes that were committed against the people that had survived, I know some of them would say that they watched their brother or sister be killed. Have they ever recovered their brother or sister's body to bury them in a proper manner?
We tried to do that. We documented, like, as far ago as 2010, I published a list of 28 mass grave sites where these children are buried in their former Indian schools, mostly in Western Canada. That's up online at itccs.org. We went to the Brantford Indian School, the Mohawk, on Mohawk territory in 2011, and we did excavate. We began to excavate with elders' permission and support. We excavated the remains of bones and buttons out of school uniforms. The bones, some of them turned out to be human, that of a young girl around 5. We began the process, but then the government and their flunky Indian chiefs came in and shut the whole thing down and smeared me all over the internet to try to get people to back off. So there have been attempts, but the problem is, it's the same old game that the killers are still in charge.
It's so sad. I just couldn't imagine knowing that my brother or sister was buried in a mass grave and there's nothing we could do about it. I mean, it's just unthinkable.
Well, and it's especially unthinkable when you think of the manner in which they died. And I know it's a tough read, but if people go through the book, you'll see, and also here, this isn't just in writing, but if you go to itccs.org, you'll see at the top of the page 4.5 hours of videotaped testimonies and other evidence from eyewitnesses describing, they were putting us with children dying of tuberculosis. I saw children being buried. I helped bury children after they were beaten to death. Kids were being used experimentally in medical programs. That's a whole other thing here. I mean, it was massive genocide, and yet,
yes.
We're living now in a culture where people seem so dead to this that it's like talking to a wall when you say this to people.
How many children do you think that they did away with?
Well, we say, and a conservative estimate is 60 to 70,000 over a century, and it's probably double that based on the figures.
That's just guessing.
Well, and they wwere churning them out, the corpses out of there like, sausages. I mean, it was like if they didn't bury them, they often incinerated them in the school furnace. We have eyewitnesses up online describing them, witnessing them doing that.
I know the one man said that they killed his brother by whipping him with a whip that had razors on the straps.
Yeah, that was Ricky LaValle. That's in our film Unrepentant, which people can watch. It's at hiddennolonger.com. Ricky was describing his 5-year-old brother who was whipped to death by a priest in Manitoba, and he was calling out to his brother for help, and he heard him being killed. And, if you can imagine, not one person has ever gone to trial or even been arrested or charged by the mainstream government and courts for any of these crimes. I mean, we know it happened, and yet the government refuses to prosecute anything because they'd be prosecuting themselves. They colluded in these crimes. So, what do you do when the criminals are still in power? It's a constant uphill battle.
I just can't imagine anybody doing something like that to a child anyways, and then calling themselves a priest.
when you know the history of the Catholic Church, it's not at all unusual. I mean, they've been doing this for centuries, starting in Europe. They did it all over the world, and they're still doing it. I mean, perfect example. The media loves this new Pope, Francis, Jorge Bergoglio, and he's posing as a big reformer and everything. Well, he's got blood on his own hands because he trafficked children when he was a bishop in Argentina during the dictatorship there in the 1980s. But not only that, he came to America last September, and he, when he's giving all these nice-sounding talks about justice for the poor and everything, he beatifies, that is, he declares a saint, this guy called Junipero Serra, who was the first Catholic missionary to California. Junipero Serra worked over 100,000 Indians to death on slave plantations. They killed anyone who wouldn't become a Catholic, and then these Catholic Indians were slaves, and they were worked to death. The death rate was like 75%, most of them children and old people. And Bergoglio, this Pope, turns around and says this guy's a saint, and he says how inspired they are by his zeal. Well, how does a Pope get away saying we're inspired by a mass murderer? Are they pretending nobody died at his hands? I mean, it's insane.
It is insane. And, and I have been getting so much flack this week because I found Judy Byington's article and about them hunting the children, and I posted that, and oh my God, you would not believe how people attacked me. This is fake, and I wrote, no, it's not fake. And then I posted her interview, and I posted your interview underneath it, and you wouldn't, I mean, people don't even want to find out the facts. They just immediately want to attack you for saying something about the Pope.
Well, I know, and it's more than being brainwashed. They're complicit in a crime. If you know somebody is guilty of a crime in an institution and you support them, you're as guilty as the perpetrator. And I have no patience for people like that. They're causing the death of children because by them supporting these people or looking the other way, children are going to die tomorrow as a result. And so that blood is on their hands. It's not just ignorance; it's complicity in murder.
Well, there were a few people that were asking when they could listen, and I said that you were going to be on. So on that subject, why don't you tell everybody that's in the window right now just exactly what happens to these children when they hunt them and how you know about this?
Well, we've read references, in various things over the years about this, but when I was in Europe 3 years ago, working with the Common Law Court in Brussels, I met two women, both of them Dutch women, Toos Nieuwenhuis and Anne-Marie van Billenberg. Now, both of their statements are up online. They're at itccs.org. You can see these links. And when you watch these statements, you can tell this is very genuine because these women were both raised in satanic ritual families. They gave extreme detail of how the cult operates, how their father, both of them, this is true, in order to rise up through the cult, they had to rape their own daughter and torture their own children, and even on one occasion kill newborns. And this is, standard if anyone has read anything about satanic ritual torture. But they gave great detail about who was involved, including fairly major politicians, members of their European royal families, and so on. They're like with the Indian residential school testimonies, that what they said was confirmed by other people who they don't even know. The same stories from different people who are unconnected. And, so I really urge people to look at these statements first. And you can tell, I've had many years as a counselor and as a minister, and I can tell right away when somebody is either making something up or because they don't have the detail. And you can tell in their eyes, too. Both of these women were extremely haunted. They had the look that rape and torture victims have. You can't fake that. And so, and not only that, but what they were saying was agreeing with other stuff we've uncovered from insiders in the Vatican who have described how the Ninth Circle sacrificial cult operates within the Catholic Church. It's centuries old, and it involves ritual killings. So, I mean, it's a belief that, the blood of the innocent literally gives life, and that's, in fact, what they believe in the Catholic Mass.
And so they all meet at what, a compound or a castle or some property somewhere?
She mentioned a number of castles, chateaux in Belgium. The human hunting party that Anne-Marie witnessed was in a forest right outside Brussels. It involved fairly major people, including George Soros, who's the big financial backer for Hillary Clinton. These European and North American elites, they're routinely participate in these things.
Have any of the children ever got away?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, one of the things TOS Nienhaus does is operates a safe house in order to help kids get out of this network. Her own daughter, Carmen, was involved, and she got her out. The problem is these perpetrators are they've got a lot of money and influence, and they you got to get these kids right off the radar screen, or they'll be hunted down and killed, as will be the people who are helping them. So it's kind of like in the slave days. It's like slavery. You need an underground railway to get them out of these situations.
Well, the last time we talked about this, you had mentioned that they actually take body parts off these children.
Well, that's a standard practice in any ritual killing. You always take trophies from your victims. And Anne-Marie described how in this one incident where she saw Prince Friso, the son of the present Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands, George Soros, and members of the various Dutch political parties, there were these three young people, teenagers really. They were brought by the police under orders of the Queen herself. They were brought out of juvenile detention centers in Brussels, and in Amsterdam and Antwerp. They were brought from Holland into Belgium, and they were stripped naked and made to run through the woods. And these people chased them with guns, shot them, and when they killed the boys, they cut off their penises. And Anne-Marie said these were later mounted on a wall, along with other similar grisly trophies in this castle near Brussels. The castle was owned by the Knights of Malta, which is a secret Catholic society. And it's also a group called the Club Lorraine, which is an elite club in Brussels, where these people are all members of it. So I mean, it's the mafia is involved. There's a lot of big money behind it. Drangheta, the name of the European mafia, they provide the children and the bodies for these rituals.
So these young boys were just in a juvenile detention center, and they were whisked away. Where did their parents think that they went?
Well, they don't ask, of course. If they've got a criminal record, that's part of this process is you criminalize a child at a young age, and then you can do whatever you want to them once they're in the system. They do that to Indians in Canada and America all the time. They'll fake an offense. They'll say, "Oh, this child's being abused." You take them away. You charge the parents, and then you've got them for life. You've got them locked in your system.
Yeah.
It helps in Canada that Indians aren't citizens. You see, they're wards of the state, so the state can do whatever they want to them legally. And that, facilitates these crimes in a big way. That's why so many natives still go missing.
Who decided that they would just automatically be wards of the state?
The Indian Act in 1874, when the country was first formed. The Indian Act was brought in, and that's never been changed. Now, Canada, on the one hand, pretends to be a humane nation, and yet they've got this apartheid legislation which allows them to reduce Indians to non-human beings, non-citizens. That's what we mean about the genocide not ending. It's the same legal structure that you had 100 years ago.
Right. So they're still coming in and just taking children out of the mother's arms and taking them away?
Oh, yeah, routinely. That happens all the time. There's so many cases of this that you lose count. But the mainstream society never reports it. You've got to hear it from the people on the ground. And, the pieces are never put together in one coherent picture. Until now, I mean, I show a lot of this in my book, Murder by Decree, which is really why people should read it and see for themselves.
It's just unbelievable. It's so heartbreaking for a mother to have her child and she can't do anything because she's the ward of the state.
Yeah, well, that's the
there's
point.
no way for them to escape from that. Can they flee the country and become a citizen somewhere else?
Yeah, but most the majority of Indians are living in a lot of poverty. And until just a few years ago, anyone on reserve was confined there by what's called a green card. You couldn't leave the reservation. It was like a prison system. You needed a pass to get out. And the government controlled the pass and gave it to the people they liked and punished those they didn't like. So these have always been concentration camps. And, you know, in the same way the Indian schools weren't schools, they were death camps. So we've got to start using the right term for these places, right, so people start learning what's really going on.
What about their health care, Kevin? When they go to the doctors, is this how they are sterilizing the women?
Well, they can do whatever they want because under the Indian Act, no Indian on reservation can refuse medical treatment. So I've had cases of hearing about, you know, public health nurses and Catholic nurses going on to reservations and literally just shoving the needle in the arms of the babies using experimental drugs. Big Pharma has funded a lot of the churches for many years to provide children for their drug testing programs. That was one of the things that went on in the Indian schools. But it's still going on reserve. So, yeah, I mean, remember when the swine flu thing happened? They were going on to the Indian reservations off the west coast of British Columbia, like the Hausa Reserve, and they were forcing people to take the Tamiflu drug to see the effect. And over half the people came down with swine flu. So they were, you know, they were creating epidemics deliberately and then studying the effect, just like they always have done with Indians.
That's kind of how they feel about targets. They use these weapons and experiment on targets, and they don't care what happens to them.
Well, you know, it's like when the Israelis drop new weapons on the Palestinians who they've got caged in just like Indians on a reservation. They've got them caged in the Gaza Strip, and then they drop these experimental weapons on them. Americans do the same thing in Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, it's the Indians in North America are just like a third world society, and they're treated exactly like Palestinians or any group that is being wiped out.
So tell us what you've been up to, Kevin. I saw that you actually spoke at the UN. Tell us what's been going on.
Well, a few things. With the book coming out this last month, I've been on speaking tour across America, and I started on the East Coast. I spoke in Philadelphia, New York City, you know, up and down the coast. And when we were in New York City, there were 4 of us. We were a delegation from the ITCCS, the International Tribunal of Crimes of Church and State. And we presented, on March 31st, we presented a formal petition to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And it said that it demanded that England, Canada, and the Vatican all be expelled from the General Assembly because they're convicted criminal bodies. They're under the conviction of the common law court cases, which has legal standing. Any court can enforce these verdicts. These nations and churches have all been found guilty of crimes against humanity and covering up these crimes, and they're rogue bodies under international law. They should not be sitting in the UN. So this guy has until tomorrow, actually, April 30th, to respond. And if he doesn't, there's going to be a move to censor him at the UN having colluded in these crimes and protecting the perpetrators. So, you know, we're keeping that pot going and stirring the pot continually. But we're finding, and for example, I was out recently in California and speaking to Sacramento and Davis and Berkeley. We were meeting members of the American Indian movement there who want to start the same investigation in America into these Indian schools. And so we're going to be working with them to do the same thing that we did in Canada.
So the same thing is going on in the United States, correct?
Oh, big time. I mean, I'll give you one example. On the Gila Indian Reservation in Arizona, more children are disappearing from that one reserve than any group in the country. And we know it's related to child trafficking and other, you know, satanic ritual killings and that, using Indians. One of the Navajo women who came to my talk in Sacramento just a few days ago said that Navajo women regularly go missing, and sometimes they're found missing body parts, like their ears or their nose. And now some of the people doing that are the Aryan nations, because as part of their initiation ritual, you have to go out and kill a black or an Indian and bring back a piece of their body to prove that you did it. And so we know these crimes are going on, and the police, of course, don't investigate because they're often, you know, connected to these white supremacist groups. So that's one example of these crimes. And, you know, again, when's the last time you heard about that in the newspaper?
Well, I certainly haven't. But I do know that the gangs do murders and sick crimes to get initiated.
Yeah.
I just can't believe, they just act like because they're a different colored skin, they're not human beings and they don't matter. It's beside me. And
well,
when you said you can look at someone and tell, I watched those testimonies today. I saw the pain in those faces. I saw those people weep. They aren't making this up.
No. And, it's hard when white people and others finally accept that. They realize they have to do something about it. Because knowledge of something makes you responsible. You can't know that a child's being beaten next door and look the other way. That makes you colluding in a crime. And morally and legally, we have an obligation to do something once we know. So I think people would prefer to pretend they don't know, because then they don't have to, act on what they know.
When you were first allowing people to come up and speak at your church, when you were hearing these stories, what did you first think?
Well, it's hard at first when you've been raised in a certain church to believe this stuff, but I couldn't deny it after a while. I mean, I knew the history of churches around the world, and they did these crimes, but when people began telling me things that I found confirmed in documents, you can't deny these things. Here's one perfect example. In the healing circles and in my church, I'd keep hearing these stories all the time of Native men and women saying, yeah, when we were in Indian school, they never gave us painkiller. The dentist would just come in and rip the tooth out of our mouth with pliers, or they'd give us fillings without painkiller. And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't in somebody's story. There I am about a year later in the University of British Columbia Library, and I find these microfilm records in the residential schools. And lo and behold, there's a letter with an annotated record of a Vancouver dentist from 1924 showing a list of the children who he gave painkiller to and those he didn't. Right? So in other words, it was used as a form of punishment. In kids that they wanted to focus on and destroy because they were from, say, a chiefly family, they would just torture that way, never give them painkillers. So in a court of law, you just need a testimony and you need some documentation to verify it, or corroborating testimonies. We've got all of that. We've got 358 eyewitnesses whose stories went in or murder by decree. The Nuremberg trials based their condemnation of the Nazis on 34 witnesses. We've got 10 times that number.
And yet no one's doing anything.
Well, we are, and we are getting people to wake up to the fact that you can't use the present system. It's the problem. We need to set up common law courts and take back our power to stop these criminals, because the next child they could do that, it would be your own.
Yes, and they're working on that through our system, through our social system to take. I know a lot of the targeted women that have children are under attack by the social services, and they try to make them out as unfit mothers so that they can try to take their children away.
Yeah.
Do you think that would you do it again? Would you do it again if because everything that you've gone through, you've been under attack, you've lost your family, you've lost your standing, in the community by them smearing you, and you lost your income because they kicked you out of the church. Would you do it again, Kevin?
Of course I would, because I'm not going to collude in a crime. I'm not going to cooperate with these murders, no matter what it costs me. I mean, there's things much more important in life than our own comforts and security. And when it involves the torture of children and, our own integrity, our own soul, then of course I'd do it again. I mean, you can't be a human being and not fight for children. And so, I mean, they can attack us all they want. It doesn't make any difference ultimately, because they're the criminal, not me. And, I mean, that's what part of my consolation is, knowing that.
Yeah. We have a question, so let's unmute. Welcome to the call, Arizona. You have a question for Kevin?
Yes. Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
I believe that a great deal of the judgment of North America is going to be due to this. Do you agree with that?
judgment? You mean spiritual judgment?
God's judgment, yes.
Yes. Oh, I think we're already under judgment, and the verdict has come down not only from our court but from the heavenly court. I think that we've been found wanting, and we are going to have to pay a consequence for all the ones who have died at our hands. And I'm not saying that to from a place of anger and condemnation, but just a fact. All you have to do is read Scripture, and you see that there is a divine judgment. So yeah, I agree.
And even for those that turn a blind eye, Kevin, people that want to live in their comfort zone and not know the truth, they don't want to hear these things, they're just as guilty because they're allowing it to happen.
Well,
I've always prayed for the Native American people. I've always believed that it's very important that we ask God for forgiveness for what we've done to their race.
Well, and it's, yes, and it's also, when we don't help the most vulnerable among us, any of us can be next. And I think that the very fact that so few people have responded to this is part of a bigger message to us, that we're living in a world of dead souls, by and large, people who are in such a state of fallenness that they don't really care one way or the other. And so that's part of the judgment and this separation that's going on. I think there is a great separation, and that's all through the Bible. You read it, this final separation.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Arizona. I just want to apologize to everybody in the chat room. I did not notice that guest 3 was writing the things that they were saying, and they're gone now, so I can't delete it. So sorry about that. I'm under attack in the chat room.
Oh, well, that's a sign you're doing something good. I mean,
yeah, I'm being told I should just go and die.
It's amazing the anger and hatred this stuff evokes. But don't forget, this work has been the target of a massive smear campaign, a state-sponsored Black Ops misinformation campaign since at least 1998. And these guys have never let up, which says to me, well, this isn't just about something that happened long ago. They're very worried about this coming out because it's about now. And, so I think it's a good sign when we're attacked, and it shows that these cowards can only shoot from the darkness. They don't have the integrity to stand up, even give their real name, and challenge us in an open debate. I've never been sued in 20 years of doing this work. Never been sued. No one's ever shown any counter evidence to disprove what I'm saying. That proves that it's true. All they can do is attack me, and that's because the truth is on our side.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing that they don't understand is that it doesn't, they're wasting their time. It doesn't bother me because I know that it doesn't mean nothing. I don't let it affect me, just like I'm sure you came to a point where, the harassment, just don't let it affect you and it's not effective.
No, I've always operated from a place of truth and love, and that puts us in a higher frequency and doesn't allow that stuff to get through to us. People often say, why are you still alive? I don't operate in their frequency, because if I did, I'd probably be dead by now. And we are impervious when we're standing in the love of God. I've learned that many times.
That's it. You just got to stay in the love frequency and the light, and be there for others. That's all that matters.
Yeah, that's true.
Once we learn what we're here for, and that's to love one another and help one another, the material doesn't matter, or what people say about you doesn't matter, because we know our own hearts, and the first thing we need to do is learn to love ourselves. What do you think is going to happen next, Kevin? I mean, with what you're doing, is it affecting them? Are they more cautious? Is it slowing down with what they're doing?
Well, no, they're just hiding it more effectively. I mean, in one sense, some changes have been made because of the pressure we brought to bear. And they're frightened. They're a lot more cautious now than they used to be. But at the same time, like I mentioned earlier, they're destroying all the evidence. They're destroying grave sites. they're doing their best to clean house because they know that more and more people around the world are looking now at Canada's crimes. So, they're doing what anyone with blood on their hands does, and hoping that all the fear and lies and distraction around, what they've created about our campaign will hold people off long enough to allow them to get rid of all the evidence. And that's kind of their strategy. But there's too much out now. There's too many people who've spoken. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you couldn't mention this stuff, and now everyone seems to be at least acknowledging it. So, there are steps. But the important thing now is to see how it's happening and ongoing and as we speak, and how this isn't something, 50 years ago.
Well, when they put the Arch of Baal up and unveiled it, I was very concerned because I didn't, I knew that it had to do with satanic worship, but I went and looked it up, and I did not know that it had to do with child sacrifice. And I was very, very concerned when they opened them up and unveiled them that children were going to be sacrificed. Do you feel that was what was going on?
This is in relation to what?
The Arch of Baal that they put up in New York City and in London.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Oh, you didn't see that?
Which
oh,
one?
You'll have to go check that out. You know what? I'll send you the links to it in your email. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they put up reassembled it. It was destroyed by ISIS, and they reassembled it and unveiled it in New York City and in London.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually has to do with, it represents lewd sex and child sacrifice.
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
And I'm like, why in the world are we constructing this? And actually, Obama visited the one in London and did some kind of ceremony while he was there, obviously satanic.
Yeah.
But yeah, there is already a video up on YouTube. Pastor Paul put it up where when they unveiled it, there were two shadow images that one went across in the front and one went over there was like a building behind it that had a dome, and you could see it. It disappeared behind the dome. And they said that those were demon entities that were floating around because of what it represents.
Yeah.
Some crazy stuff going on, but I was very, very worried about what would happen to the children because of the child sacrifice. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is what do you think about the fact that everyone's saying that Prince was a sacrifice for the Queen on her birthday?
Oh, the guy who just died?
Yes.
Oh, I have no idea. I mean, I haven't heard anything about that. It would just be speculation on my part. But
well, if you go look at the pictures, Obama, when he went to visit the Queen on her birthday, Prince was famous for the song Purple, and everything that he started his concerts with were purple, and all you hear about is purple. Well, Michelle Obama wore a dress that was the exact purple that Prince used to wear. I thought that was kind of strange.
Mm. Yeah.
You know how they give their little subliminal messages?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what they're saying on the internet is that he was a sacrifice, and that it also tied in with this Arch of Baal, that he was part of one of the sacrifices. I guess for 14 days it's supposed to represent sacrifice.
Yeah, well, the thing is, there's a lot of different theories, and it can get confusing after a while because we can't often sort out the difference between something based on fact and somebody's opinion, right? But I really want to emphasize with people listening today that everything I'm talking about in this book, Murder by Decree, and all the work we do is based on some very solid things. First of all, eyewitness testimony. Secondly, not just one testimony, but it's usually corroborated by 2 or 3 other people. Secondly, documents proving what they're talking about, okay? And thirdly, the reaction of the system itself. Every time we bring this stuff out, they attack us. Now, they wouldn't do that. Here's a perfect example. When David Icke speaks to 20,000 people in London, nobody's attacking him, right? Well, if he was really talking about serious stuff, he'd be shut down. He wouldn't be allowed to have a television station. So I think, when people are talking about their theories of aliens or reptiles or whatever, if you're allowed to do it, it's a sign right there that, well, then there's nobody really, threatened by that, right? It's almost distraction. Because every time we open our mouth, we get it from 5 directions, and that's proof right there that why would somebody be doing that unless we were hitting a nerve?
Right. Plus, there actually was court cases in Brussels, and they were found guilty, correct?
There were 2 different cases in 2013 and 2014. The first case, and here's the other proof, when the first case having to do with genocide in Canada and child trafficking in the Catholic Church, Pope Benedict was the main defendant in that, along with Queen Elizabeth. He resigned in the same 2-week period that the verdict came in. So did 3 other top cardinals who were all named in the indictment of the court. So if you've got 4 people all resigning after they're named in the court case, do you think that's a big coincidence? I mean, they know something that most people don't know, which is that in our common law verdict, even though we don't have the power to go physically arrest them at the moment, other police can. Other courts can issue arrest warrants based on our evidence and the findings of our court. So they know it's a gun aimed right at them, and they didn't want to be arrested while in office because then they've got to take the fall. I mean, this is why people resign from office. They're getting pressured from the other criminals saying, "Look, we don't want the heat on us. You go away somewhere." And that's what the first time in history a pope had done that. But people pass it by and think, "Oh well," they're not seeing the effect of what we're doing.
Right, and didn't they use the cover story of? They said that it was his health is why he resigned.
Oh yeah, of course they always say it's health. I mean, just like they said it was whenever they killed an Indian child, they said, "Oh, he died of tuberculosis," because it's easy to claim that, right?
So they actually took healthy children and made them be mixed in with children that had tuberculosis to try to spread the disease.
Standard practice for over 50 years. The same thing was happening in 1900. It was happening in 1960. So it shows you a policy at work. It's not just some random nutbars doing this. We've had eyewitnesses like Del Marjani and others in our film Unrepentant describing how they were locked in the same dorm with children dying of tuberculosis and then never let out. He got very sick from TB as a result of it, almost died. There's letters describing the practice. Dr. Peter Bryce, the first medical officer to talk about this, he got thrown out of the civil service for doing it. He wrote a whole report. The quote was, "I believe conditions are being deliberately created to spread infectious disease. The death rate is over 50%. This is a national crime." I mean, that's in 1909. That's early in the era of the residential school. So their own top doctors are talking about it. Witnesses are talking about it. Documents are showing it, and yet people are claiming it didn't happen.
I just don't understand how they can get away with doing this. It's like, hey, I can murder someone, and there's nothing you can do because the court and everybody is owned by me. And people just walk around like they pretend like it doesn't happen.
It's a wake-up call to everybody that this society is run by mass murderers and psychopaths. And every time you pay your taxes and vote for them and support their system, you're helping the crime. And we have to make a fundamental break from that system so we don't, so these things stop. The only way to stop the crime is to stop the system causing it.
Absolutely. Same with our election. I don't go and vote for any of these criminals because I'm not going to be part of what they're part of. We all know what they're part of. They're just as deep into this as all of them. There's Kathy O'Brien. Are you familiar with Kathy O'Brien?
Oh, I know Kathy. I've spoken to her.
Yes, and she was raped by Hillary Clinton. So why would you want, and Hillary Clinton, it just kills me. She got told to bring $2,000 or $200,000 worth of artifacts back to the White House when they left. I mean, why would you invite her back in?
Yeah.
I don't know why we have criminals running for president. That's another thing that boggles my mind. And they're not doing anything about it because they're putting her in place. The whole system is so corrupt, it's just, I won't participate in it anymore.
Yep.
Why waste my gas? The voting machines are rigged anyways.
Well, they're controlled by the electronic computers, the Diebold thing. They can program any election result they want. So.
Well, then why waste your gas then?
That's right.
Okay, we have another question. Yes, Arizona, you have a question?
Yes. And a statement again. I grew up in a house that at one time was a TB sanitarium for the Papago Indians. And it was, from what I understand, there were some real horror stories about that place. And I know for a fact that there was a graveyard behind it. That graveyard was plowed over, and they just put houses on top of it. They didn't even move the remains.
Yep.
I mean, there are a lot of instances in Arizona that I know of where the Native people have just been treated abominably. And they have the same kind of Indian schools here that they have up in Canada. And they're still running. They still run.
That's right. There's one in Chamberlain, South Dakota, St. Joseph's Catholic School. It's still running. They're still harming children. Like, how do, it's just that mind-boggling.
Now, that neighborhood that they put a housing over the cemetery, didn't they do a movie about that? Patty Duke starred in that movie. Because those houses.
Could you ask that question again? I didn't hear it. I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure they did a movie about that because those houses were like $600,000 homes, and they ended up being haunted.
Well, not this particular house. This particular house, it was in a neighborhood that was fairly poverty-stricken.
Oh, okay. Because there is a movie out there that
Patty
Duke stars in about that.
Everything down. Huh?
There is a movie out there, and I can't think of the name of it, but Patty Duke stars in it, and they move into this house that it was haunted. There was a lot of strange things happening, and people in the neighborhood were all moving out, and then they did some excavating in the backyard, put a swimming pool in, and that's when they found out, when they started digging, that there were graves on the property.
Yes. Now, that house I lived in was haunted. Very definitely haunted. I remember when I was a little girl, seeing things and hearing things all the time. We had people move into that house after we moved out. People moved in, and they didn't stay but a week.
Okay, well, Kevin's only got a few more minutes with us because he's only doing an hour tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, it's really important for people with those stories to come forward because we can save lives. When you said earlier, has anything good happened? Absolutely. I'll tell you one thing. About 2 years ago, Interpol in Europe arrested about 1,000 people who were trafficking children. And some of the people they arrested were people who we had identified, and we gave them the information. And they discovered 30 children in cages in Holland. And so, those 30 children were probably going to get killed, and we saved their lives, by exposing this stuff. So we can't ever give up because children's lives are at stake. And so it's really important that this information be surfaced and shared. I want to say if anyone has information, please share it with me at my email, which is hiddenfromhistory1, like number 1, hiddenfromhistory1@gmail.com, and go to the website murderbydecree.com and itccs.org.
Okay, Kevin, what can we do besides if we have a story to share? What can we do just as an average citizen to try to help expose this?
Well, one thing to do is we're setting up groups wherever people live to monitor the community. When we see children being harmed and real injustice is happening, we're helping to train people in the common law so you can convene your own common law court, elect your own common law sheriffs if your local sheriff won't help you, and take direct action to protect children. That's the bottom line. We have to save children directly and not let them be carted off. And so we can form those action groups. We can form groups to talk about this stuff and educate the community. There's a lot we need to be doing, so we have to start where you are, but based on the information and evidence we have now, which is quite considerable.
Well, we want to thank you, Kevin, for coming out and sharing with us tonight. And God bless you in your work. And, I know that you've gone through a lot in your life, and I'm really sorry, for the tragedy that you have to suffer for standing up for what's right. But I guess somebody's got to do it, just like I got to do it too. And, you get to the point where you figure, this is why we're here.
Yeah, well,
I know I watched your story when you were saying when you walked in that church, you knew you were there for a special reason, and I think that God chose you. I really do.
Well, thank you, and I'll keep you updated, and as more developments happen, we'll come back and share them. Thank you for having me on again.
Well, God bless you, and everybody, get a hold of Kevin if you've got a story or some evidence or anything that you can do to help him out in any way, or go to his site, click on his donation button and give him some money and help him out to try to protect the children.
Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, well, I did not know that he was only going to do an hour till right when we started the show. So, I don't know, I can go and tell you a little bit of some of the things that are going on. We had a 7.1 earthquake yesterday off of the islands across from Australia. So we are really having an uptake in the earthquakes. Also, we had some interesting pictures I was looking at the other day. Someone said the moon flipped. I don't know if anyone noticed, but if you look at the moon, when you see the face on the moon, it's usually like facing us, and it has like the moon like flipped backwards. It's up more on the top. Where was that? I think it was Steve Alston was the one that was showing the pictures. There was a lady in California and a lady in Texas that had got pictures of it before and after. And sure enough, it has flipped. So there's some strange things that are going on. Also, if you go over to Robert Evans on his Facebook page, he has a lot more pictures of people capturing Planet X, and it's getting closer. And it's weird because Steve Olson says that there's some kind of a shield that's in front of our sun, and he had some pictures from the observatory yesterday, and it was weird because the way it did look like there was something like a shield there, and there was light gleaming from behind it. So you could see from the light gleaming behind the sun, it showed up at the edge of the shield. And it's like, whoa. So, wow, there are some strange things going on out there in space. The other thing I wanted to bring up was, I don't know if you guys heard, but they have come out with a new chemtrail. It's black. And then when they have the plane spray the black chemtrail, and then another one comes right under it and sprays the white one. Then it kind of, you know how chemtrails kind of spread out and they make a soft-looking cloud. It kind of turns into a gray, yucky-looking thing. And all I can say is, what new poison have they found for us now? I want to talk a little bit about what's going on over here with the Flint water crisis. I was looking on Facebook yesterday, and the two people who were appointed by this committee to investigate what's going on with the Flint water crisis, well, they just happen to be dead. Both found in their houses on different days, I think like a day or so apart, and they're dead. So I guess it doesn't pay to try to investigate and find out who's responsible. I know there are already, there's a few people that they've charged, but, you know, I mean, it's still in court. There's a lot of lawsuits that are going on, and I guess these people were hired to investigate for these lawsuits, and I think it's awful funny how they just showed up dead. So that's some of the stuff that's going on around the world. We've been having a lot more animal die-offs, and there's a lot of talk going on about the 2 nuclear plants that are still pumping radiation. The one is down in Florida, and the other one's up in New York, and they're still leaking radiation. No one's saying anything about it. Everyone's just acting just like they did with Fukushima, like it's not happening, but it is. And Tom, what's that guy's name? I'll think of it real quick here. He is the guy who he put Lupsha. Okay, I have contacted Tom. He has a YouTube video up where he had talked to a military insider that went to the last FEMA meeting, and they're setting up. FEMA is setting up in 3 strategic locations across the United States, along the New Madrid, just south of Yellowstone Park, and I can't remember where the third one was. But anyways, he actually went and spoke with a retired military, I think he said he was a colonel, and got the inside info on what's going on, and they're very, very concerned. They're very concerned that something's going to happen real soon. Well, he said one of the things that they were worried about was the extra water weight, and I thought, extra water weight? Well, they must be talking about all the storms that are going across the South that are hitting Texas and Louisiana and Missouri, and those people are just drowning in floods down there. And, as far as I can see, I think it's being done by HAARP. I think they're under attack, to tell you the truth. But who knows? Who knows what's going on. But, I think it's awful funny that FEMA is concerned with the extra water weight when they've got like 9 feet of water floating around, and they think that something's going to happen. Well, I was looking at some videos about Yellowstone Park yesterday, and they've actually got a team of experts that are walking around on the geysers up there, and they're doing a study, they said, and they're walking where you're not allowed to walk because you could actually go through. So they're trying to figure something out. Also, I think it's the Snake River that runs through the Grand Canyon. They were saying that the river is boiling not far from the park. So that tells you that the lava is coming up and something's going on. Now, we're having a lot more volcanoes become active. Actually, I was looking at that yesterday, and there are 38 active volcanoes around the Ring of Fire. And I think they said that there was like 10 or 12, 6 or 7 point earthquakes in the last 30 days around the Ring of Fire. And that's exactly what Terrell was talking about when I had him on last time. I have emailed him, and I sent him some information about the volcanoes. He emailed me back and said, remember I told you that more volcanoes were going to become active and there was going to be an increase in the earthquake uptakes. And I said, yeah, I remember. Now, what he had said, for those that weren't on that show, he had said that May 7th, I think he said, the weekend of May 7th, or somewhere around that date. So it could be before or it could be after. But he is saying that he's expecting a major earthquake in the United States area. So we'll see, but something's going on. And I'll tell you that FEMA is getting ready for something big. So just be on your guard. Make sure you have your water supply and emergency food, and keep abreast of what's happening. You know, I have not been feeling that well, and I think I'm going to back off on my shows for a little bit. Right now I'm just cutting back on my Wednesday show. I won't be out here next Wednesday. I'm going to be out here the Wednesday after that. And until I can get over whatever's hanging on to me, it's some kind of a virus, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to try to keep up with my Fridays. I'm booked up for the next 2 or 3 weeks for right now. But if I don't get much better after that, I don't know. I'll just have to keep you guys on the abreast of what's going on. So I hate to desert you because things are really heating up. I asked Tom if he would come on. He said he couldn't come this Friday. I don't think he realizes that I'm booked. But I did tell him I was booked. I told him that if he wanted to do a show right away, I could open my window on an off night. So if you get an email from me saying I'm out here on an off night, that's probably going to be Tom, which I am going to have open lines when he comes on, and I'm going to allow everybody to call in and ask him questions, because I'd rather you ask him directly about what's going on instead of me trying to remember he said this or he said that, and that's one of the reasons why I want to have him on, because I want it to come straight from the horse's mouth. But other than that, you guys, I did not have a lot of material to go over tonight because I figured Kevin would be out here for the 2 hours. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this window out, and next week, join me. I will have Echo Bodine out here, and we'll talk about her profession and her book. And like I said, next Wednesday, I'm not going to be out here. I'll be out here the Wednesday after that. And what we're going to talk about then is our intestinal health and our colon health. So on that note, I hope you guys all enjoyed the show. Come back this next Friday, and I'll be back out here. Everybody stay safe. Have a blessed night.